Hey everyone, Theo here. In this video, I'm going to help you decide which iPad model to get for creating digital art. And I'm going to go through the main pros and cons for each model you see here. This is the iPad mini, the iPad Air, and the iPad Pro. Now let me introduce myself first. I'm Theo. I'm actually a graphic designer who happens to run this YouTube channel on my free time. And also on my free time, I enjoy sketching outdoors on location. I enjoy urban sketching, and these are some of the sketches that I have drawn on location. Oh, disclaimer, this is not a sponsored video. I have actually purchased all these tablets for the purpose of making this video. So if you guys want to buy any tablet, consider supporting my YouTube channel and the work that I do here by making your purchases through the affiliate links that I have in the video description below. And if you happen to have a Shopee Singapore account, you can click through the Shopee link below to get a voucher that's up to 30% off credited to your account. Alright, let's start. So currently, if you buy any iPad model from Apple, they will all have pen support. Which Apple Pencil is supported will depend on which tablet you buy, and the easiest way to check is to go to Apple's website and click on any of the tablet that you're interested in. For example, let's click on the iPad mini, go to the buy page and scroll down to see what Apple Pencil do they recommend. Another way to check is to search for compare iPad models on Google and look through the search results and choose the one that goes to Apple's website, and you will be brought to this page. Scroll down and look at the pen support here. Currently, Apple sells 4 pen models: Apple Pencil 1, Apple Pencil 2, Apple Pencil Pro, and Apple Pencil USB-C, and some of the pens are not interchangeable. Different Apple Pencils will have different features, but ultimately, the pen performance that you can get when it comes to writing and drawing is going to be very similar. And by pen performance, I'm talking about tilt sensitivity, pressure sensitivity, and palm rejection. However, the drawing experience with the pen is going to be slightly different depending on which tablet you get. For example, with the iPad, without the laminated display, when you are drawing, when you tap on the display, the tapping sound is hollow. On the iPad mini, iPad Air, and iPad Pro, when you tap on the display, the sound is dampened slightly because of the laminated display. So the sound is not as sharp. And there is minimal difference with pen latency when drawing on the iPad Pro with its 120Hz display versus drawing on the other iPads with their 60Hz display. So as I draw here right now on the display with 60Hz refresh rate, this is still very responsive. So if you're buying a tablet with a 60Hz refresh rate for drawing, you won't be missing out much. The pan, zoom, and rotate animation is still very smooth. The main difference between 60 Hz versus 120 Hz refresh rate is when there are a lot of animation or movement going on. For example, right now I'm moving across different apps. There is a lot of visuals moving. Yes, that's when you can see the difference. When you open an app and the app zooms, there is a lot of animation going on. Yes, you can see the difference. I will talk more about the other features from the Apple Pencil as I talk about each individual iPad model later. But the main thing you should know is the pen performance when it comes to drawing across all these different tablets is going to be very similar regardless of which Apple Pencil you use. So when it comes to choosing the tablets, you can choose based on the features provided by the tablet. Alright, let's start with the smallest tablet first. The iPad mini is the most portable tablet from Apple, and that's the main selling point. What I like about this is you can handle it very easily with just one hand. So sometimes when I'm commuting to work on a train, I will pull out my tablet. It can be the iPad mini or the 11-inch tablet and start drawing. With this tablet, it's lightweight enough for me to hold it in one hand in landscape orientation and draw like this, or I can hold it in portrait orientation like this, and I can grip it really tight. The downside here is because the display is so small, the type of drawing apps that are best suited for use on the iPad mini are apps with minimal user interface elements. For example, with this app Concepts, I have the tool wheel here and the layers palette here, and I can hide the tools very easily. They don't take up much space, so this gives me a lot more canvas space to work with. I noticed that when I hold the iPad mini horizontally to draw, I like to place my palm on the display, but doing so will cover a big portion of the display and leave a much smaller area to work with. If I hold it vertically like this, my hand does not have much space to rest, so usually I would draw like this, and the tablet is moving and the hand is moving, so it's quite difficult to control the lines. But for loose, quick sketches like this, it's alright. When drawing on a small tablet, I find that I have to zoom in and out more often. For example, when I need to draw details, I have to zoom in so that the visuals are bigger, so that I can draw the details more easily. And then I have to zoom out to check the composition, zoom in again to draw the details. But on a bigger tablet, on an 11-inch tablet, the visuals are quite big, so I don't actually have to zoom in as often. I can just draw like this and move to a different location and draw. Sometimes I will still zoom out to check the overall sketch, but I don't have to zoom in and out as often compared to drawing on a smaller tablet. And I find that drawing details on a small tablet is kind of challenging. Drawing apps with many UI elements on the display are not going to work as well. For example, when you have the layers palette by the side and you have the brushes by the side, those controls, those palettes are going to take up a lot of space on such a small display. You can think of the iPad mini as the ultimate portable digital sketch pad. It's great for sketching, but it's not as good for creating detailed illustrations or large illustrations because of the constant need to zoom in and out. Another thing you have to think about is how are you going to bring this out? Are you going to put this in a bag, which means you will have to bring a bag? So while this is extremely portable, if I have to bring this out for sketching, I will still bring along a messenger bag so that I can put this in the bag, because my pocket, my jeans pocket is too small for this. For my ultimate digital sketchpad, I actually use a phone. This is the Samsung S25 Ultra, and the pen is stored here in the phone itself. So the other day while I was walking out to get dinner, I saw some colleagues singing in the atrium, in the lobby, so I just pulled out my phone and started to sketch. I was just going for a quick dinner, so I did not need to bring a tablet along. I did not need to bring something extra. So when I saw this, I was very happy because I can just pull out the phone from my pocket and start to sketch. So this is an even smaller display. It's a 6.9-inch display, so I had a lot of difficulty adding details. I have to zoom in and out quite often. And when I am concentrated on drawing the details like this, I would lose track of the overall perspective. So the perspective, the eye level, it's not that accurate. But it's a fun sketch, and this sketch would not be possible without this phone. The user experience of drawing on a phone is very different compared to drawing on a mini tablet because the display on a phone is much smaller, unless you're talking about a folding phone. So this display is about half the size of the iPad mini. Oh, by the way, this iPad mini supports the Apple Pencil Pro. This is a good pen and this is a powerful tablet. So it's a good option to consider if you want something very portable. But personally for me, if I want to bring a tablet out for sketching, I would just bring a larger tablet, an 11-inch tablet. So let's look at the larger tablets. This is the base model iPad, and this one was released in 2025. So this is the iPad 11 with the A16 chip, 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage. And this tablet supports Apple Pencil 1. The Apple Pencil 1 has been around since 2015 when it was first released together with the first 12.9-inch iPad Pro. So I have a grip for this Apple Pencil because the exterior is glossy and I find that it's kind of slippery, especially when my hand is sweaty. So having the grip here really helps prevent my fingers from slipping on the pen. An 11-inch tablet is a good size for drawing. This is actually slightly bigger than A5 size paper. And this is not too heavy, so you can bring this around easily. And the size makes it very easy to handle with one hand, on this side, at the bottom, or however you want to hold the tablet. So this is way easier to handle compared to a 12.9-inch or 13-inch tablet. So there is a lot of space for drawing. This app, by the way, is Concepts, my main sketching app. So on a bigger tablet, I can actually have the tool wheel out and maybe show the layers. And I can also rest my palm on the display and there is still a good space left over for drawing. If I need more space, I can hide the layers palette, but this is a very comfortable space to work with for drawing. Drawing apps with more user interface elements can still work well on this display. So when I have the layers palette by the side, when I have the brushes by the side, and also the color wheel here, there is still a good amount of space to work with, but I will still prefer, to hide the palette so that I get more space to work with. And because the display is big, I don't have to zoom in and out as often. So when drawing, I can still check the composition of my drawing. The size of this display is almost 2 times that of the iPad mini. So you do get a lot more space to work with for drawing. Now the main selling point about the iPad is the price. So this is selling at US $349 and it's usually cheaper on Amazon. The Apple Pencil is another $100, so we are looking at a total of $449 US, which is not as expensive compared to the other tablets because some of those other tablets can be really expensive. So at this price point, this is actually a good entry-level tablet with good pen performance for drawing for beginners. Even though the pen technology from this pen is more than 10 years old, Apple actually nailed the pen performance 10 years ago. So even today, 10 years later, this pen still has fantastic performance. So when I draw diagonal lines, you can see the diagonal line is really straight. And the pressure performance is fantastic. You can draw thin and thick lines very easily. You can draw thin lines very easily even with a thick brush selected. And this is the same pen performance you can expect with Apple Pencil 2 and Apple Pencil Pro. There are 2 downsides to the display on the iPad. The first one is this is very reflective because there is no anti-reflective coating. And this is how a display with anti-reflective coating will look. Can you see the difference? Yeah, so without the anti-reflective coating, reflections can be quite glaring. And also this is not a laminated display, so there is actually a gap between the LCD and the surface of the glass. So because of that gap, when you are drawing, when the pen hits the glass, there is this hollow tapping sound which I don't quite like. The refresh rate of this LCD is 60 Hz. So the main reason why I may prefer other iPads is because the display is too reflective and the display is not laminated. But otherwise, this is a very capable tablet for drawing. 6 gigs of RAM is more than sufficient for creating many layers when you are drawing. Now, one thing I don't like about this pen with this tablet is in order to charge the Apple Pencil 1, you have to use the included Lightning to USB-C adapter, and you have to connect the pen with a cable to a power source, which can be the tablet or a charger. So this method of charging does not look very elegant. And also, if you want to bring your tablet out with the pen, you have to remember to bring the charging cable, because if your pen runs out of battery when you're outdoors, how are you going to charge the pen without the charging cable? With the older iPad models from many years ago that still have the Lightning port here, you can connect the pen directly to the tablet for charging, which does not look good, but it's still more convenient compared to having to bring a cable out with you. This is a good iPad. So if you want to get an iPad but do not want to spend too much money, this is the one to consider. Now, when it comes to creating digital art, I would recommend you get a tablet with storage capacity of at least 256 gigabytes, because when you are creating artworks, they are going to take up storage. So increasing the storage or upgrading the storage from 128 gigs to 256 gigs is recommended. If you do want to increase the storage capacity for this to 256 gigs, the price for this is going to be very similar to a refurbished iPad Air with M1 processor. So do compare the prices with this versus the refurbished iPad Airs from the refurbished section on Apple's website. Let's talk about the iPad Air versus the iPad. So the last 3 models are the M1, M2, and M3 iPad Airs, and this is the M3 model released in 2025. So the physical design is quite similar to the iPad, except it's thinner. And the iPad Air has a laminated display with anti-reflective coating. So this display is actually better. And not only that, the color accuracy is said to be better as well. Apple mentions color support for P3, but at a glance, the colors on the iPad also looks really good. The M2 and M3 iPad Airs support Apple Pencil Pro, and the M1 iPad Air supports Apple Pencil 2. I want to mention the M1 and M2 iPad Airs also because you may be able to find the refurbished models for them selling at discounted prices from the refurbished section on Apple's website, and these tablets are better in many ways compared to the base iPad. So do compare prices for this refurbished models with the iPad before you buy anything. The iPad Air is available in 2 sizes, the 11-inch and the 13-inch. If you want to bring your tablet around often, go for the 11-inch because it's more portable and it's easier to handle with 1 or 2 hands. The 13-inch tablet is great for creating larger illustrations, but to me, that size is mostly a tabletop tablet. The iPad Air, depending on which model, supports Apple Pencil 2 or Apple Pencil Pro. Now for Apple Pencil 2, there is the double tap shortcut. For Apple Pencil Pro, there is also the squeeze shortcut and haptic. So when you enable the shortcuts, there is this haptic thing that goes on to let you know that you have enabled the shortcuts. Personally, for me, I will disable the shortcuts because when I'm drawing, I usually activate the shortcuts unintentionally, which I do not like. And with the Apple Pencil Pro, there is this new barrel roll feature. This barrel rotation feature gives you more control over your strokes. For example, if I want to color this table with broad horizontal strokes like this, I can do so. If I want to create this pattern across, I can do so, or if I want to draw like this, I can do so. So this is actually quite an interesting feature and can be useful for, well, artists who require this feature. So the iPad Air is a tablet to consider if you want your tablet to last longer, because the M1, M2, and M3 processor will have better longevity because they are really powerful processors, and also with 8 gigs of RAM, that is great. So if you have more budget, I would recommend you go with the iPad Air over the base iPad, because this tablet is actually better in many ways. Next, let's talk about the iPad Pro versus the iPad Air from the artist's perspective. Since the iPad Pro also use either the Apple Pencil 2 or the Apple Pencil Pro, the same pens as the iPad Air, the pen performance and the drawing experience between these two tablets is very similar. So the main differences really comes down to the extra features from the iPad Pro. This particular model, the M4 iPad Pro, comes with a tandem OLED display with maximum brightness up to 1000 nits. And this display on the iPad Air is LCD with maximum brightness up to 500 nits. Now, at a glance, the colors look good on both displays, but when you're using the tablets outdoors under bright conditions or under the sun, 1000 nits of brightness will let you see what's on the display. But 500 nits of brightness on the LCD is not sufficient to go through the reflections. Both tablets have the anti-reflective coating, but when you're using the tablet near the sun or under the sun, you have to have 1000 nits of brightness, which is the reason why I upgraded from the M2 iPad Pro to the M4 iPad Pro. It's just for the extra brightness. Many people will say that the colors and the contrast for the OLED is better, yes, but at a glance, I mean, unless you are really looking for the visual differences, at a glance, they both look good. Yes, the colors on the OLED more vibrant, contrast is higher, yes, but a good LCD can still look great. So on the 120 Hz refresh rate, I want you to pay attention to the gap between the line as it chases the pen tip. Let me increase the brush size. There is still a little gap as the line chases the pen tip, so there is some pen latency. Let me pair this with the iPad Air. So this is the 60 Hz refresh rate. Sorry, I don't have a side-by-side comparison. So as I draw, I can see the gap is actually bigger, but when I'm actually drawing on the tablet, I don't think about the latency. The drawing experience on a 60 Hz display when drawing is still very responsive. I don't feel like there is a big difference with pen latency on this tablet versus on the 120 Hz tablet. So on the 120 Hz it's responsive, yes. On the 60 Hz it's also responsive. So if you're thinking of buying the iPad Air instead of the iPad Pro because you want to save some money, the iPad Air is a good option for drawing. You get the same pen performance and the same drawing experience, but at a lower price, because the iPad Air is at least $300 to $400 US more affordable compared to the iPad Pro. One thing that many reviewers do not talk about is the pulse width modulation that OLED displays can show. So I have adjusted my camera settings to show you the pulse width modulation flickering on the iPad Pro, and this can actually affect some people with sensitive eyes. So if you're not sure whether your eyes are affected by pulse width modulation, I would highly recommend you go to a store and look at OLED displays. Go to the Apple Store and look at their M4 iPad Pros and see whether your eyes are affected. Because these are the type of things that you have to see in person in order to test for yourself. Other extra features provided by the iPad Pro don't really enhance the drawing experience. For example, there are 4 speakers on the iPad Pro instead of 2 speakers on the iPad Air. There is face unlock. For the iPad Air, it's fingerprint unlock, and for the iPad, it's also fingerprint unlock. This is a USB-C port that supports Thunderbolt and USB 4, and on the iPad Air, the transfer speed is USB 3.1 Gen 2. Anyway, both USB-C ports can output video. The iPad Pro is also available in 2 sizes, 11-inch and 13-inch. So again, if you want portability, go with 11-inch. If you want something bigger for creating detailed illustrations, go with the 13-inch. Now, one other difference between the iPad Pro versus the iPad Air is you can buy the iPad Pro with the nano texture display, which is the matte glass surface, which does not have any reflections because this matte surface will diffuse the reflections. And this looks really good. Some people say that the matte surface will affect color and contrast. Yes, slightly, but overall the visuals still look good, and personally I prefer a display that does not have any reflections because reflections, you can see here on the bezels, this is glossy. Reflections can be quite distracting. Another advantage of a large display is you can use drawing apps that require many UI elements. For example, Clip Studio. To work effectively with Clip Studio, it's best to have the palettes open, but this app is actually MIDI-Bank. So to work effectively with some of the drawing apps, you may have to have palettes open or visible all the time. So this is where having a larger display really helps. Drawing on the matte glass surface is smooth. It's not like paper. The texture is smoother, but I still can get good control over the pen, and I do prefer drawing on this texture. It's just that to buy the nano texture surface is very expensive because you have to buy the tablet, the iPad Pro, with 1 or 2 terabytes of storage, and then you will be presented with the option to buy the nano texture display with extra cost. So I have this nano texture iPad Pro only because I bought this unit secondhand at a great discount. Because if I am to buy this firsthand, brand new, I will not be able to afford it. It's overpriced. So those are the pros and cons for the different iPad models. So if you want something portable, go with the iPad mini or the 11-inch tablets. If you want to create detailed illustrations, if you want to use your display for split screen mode or as a wireless external display, go for the larger 13-inch. If you have to use your tablet outdoors under bright conditions, often go for the M4 iPad Pro with the 1000 nits of brightness. If you have limited budget, go for the iPad. If you have more budget, go for the iPad Air. I think I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. Now, in terms of value for money, I would probably say the iPad and the iPad Air provide more value. This provides more value simply because of the lower price point, but I don't like how glossy the display is, and I don't like the non-laminated display. So if you have more budget, get the iPad Air, which I think is a good compromise in terms of pricing and also feature. And anyway, regardless of which tablet you get, you will still get very good drawing performance and experience with whatever Apple Pencil that's supported by whatever tablet you get.